Kobolds are often characterized as squalid, diminutive reptiles on par with the likes of goblins or worse. Malicious, but of little actual menace. Their small stature, reptilian appearance, and often subterranean dwellings contribute to the image of them as vermin or lesser creatures. While some might grudgingly acknowledge their cunning in trap-making and mining, the prevailing view of kobolds is one of a cowardly, resentful, and ultimately hostile species. And sneak down into any forgotten mine to catch kobolds in their lairs, where they are almost certainly hard at work mining and toiling in the dark, and such a description might seem fitting. No one ever suspects that being underestimated is the kobold's very goal, a gift, one the other larger species of the cosmos have unwittingly bestowed on them for untold generations. In truth, kobolds are meticulous creatures with sorcery in their blood, a variety of reptile with a strong work ethic. Discounted as pests or worse by many others, kobolds are a long-suffering race with many talents and clever tricks. Only the foolish overlook the threat that a kobold can actually pose, or the potential hidden in one so small of stature. For like their bigger cousins, the dragonborn, kobolds too are born of the dragon. And though small, their hearts beat with the might and majesty of draconic pride, and they hold themselves with the self-assuredness of knowing exactly who and what they are that would be the envy of any other humanoid species. For in the words of the kobolds themselves, the dragon scale toughens our skin, the dragon bone adorns our skull, the dragon heart flames our sorcery. We are the dragon, and for the dragon we live. Long live the dragon. I am William Stark.
I am Omar Timsah.
And this is D&D Legends and Lore.
From the beginning, Kurdlemach was much larger than any of his kobold kin. For this reason, Kaisen's-Jock, the great green dragon god, always commanded her kobolds through Kurdlemach. As a result, the towering kobold naturally ascended to a position of leadership. When Kaisen's-Jock told the kobolds to mine for precious metals, Kurdlemach invented a pickaxe. When Kaisen's-Jock told the kobolds to tile her lair with gold, Kurdlemach minted the first Draconic coin. When Kaisen's-Jock told the kobolds to mine precious stones, Kurdlemach taught himself sorcery and learned how to divine where minerals were located. When Kaisen's-Jock's lair was finally completed, laden with platinum, filled with gold, and gleaming with gemstones, she had become the wealthiest true dragon in creation. Without further need for mortal servants, she released the kobolds from their duties to embrace their own destiny.
Kobolds. The small stature and cowardly behavior of these reptilians disguises a cunning that can be as devious and murderous as it can be innovative and constructive. They often have a strong social structure that stresses devotion to the tribe, are clever with their hands, and viciously work together in order to overcome their physical limitations. In the kobolds' version of a perfect world, they would be left alone to dig their tunnels and raise the next generation of kobolds, all the while seeking the magic that will free their imprisoned god. In the world they occupy, kobolds are often bullied and enslaved by larger creatures, or, when they live on their own, they are constantly fearful of invasion and oppression. And because those who seek to enslave and oppress kobolds often have their sights on spreading their own tyrannical influence, kobolds can, and often do, pose a threat to humanoid settlements who allow them to encroach on their territory. Although individually they are timid and shy away from conflict, kobolds are dangerous if cornered, vicious when defending their eggs, and notorious for the dangerous improvised traps they use to protect their warrens. And many a braver and smarter foe have fallen to their cunning after underestimating the diminutive creatures. Kobolds are reptilian humanoids, standing between 2 and 2.5 feet, or 60 to 75 centimeters tall, weighing 35 to 45 pounds, 16 to 20 kilograms, with scaled skin of varying colors and burnt orange to red eyes. Their legs are sinewy and they walk on clawed toes rather than on ball and heel like a human. They have long clawed fingers and a jaw similar to a crocodile. Small white or tan horns protrude from their heads, and they have thin, sinewy, rat-like tails. Kobolds can vary in how their scales are colored and patterned. Although other humanoids might have difficulty telling two similar-looking kobolds apart, the kobolds themselves can easily recognize each other. Most kobolds of the same tribe tend to have similar coloration. Two tribes that merge eventually crossbreed enough to create a new look, although occasional outliers and throwbacks are born that bear the appearance of one of the original tribes. Kobolds have close biological ties to dragons. The most important difference between the two, however, is that kobolds are cold-blooded creatures and dragons are warm-blooded. While kobolds do generate some internal body heat from taking in food and engaging in activity, they are dependent on their environment for warmth. This is one reason why they live underground, especially in their native temperate climate. Being a cold-blooded humanoid has advantages and disadvantages. Warm temperatures are comfortable to kobolds, who can sustain their bodies by literally soaking up heat. The downside is that kobolds feel the cold more profoundly. Sudden chilling temperatures, such as being struck by a cone of cold spell, do not affect kobolds more than normal, but prolonged cold increases their need for sustenance. Kobolds grow and mature much more swiftly than members of other humanoid races. At 6 years old, a kobold is considered an adult. Most succumb to violence, accidents, or disease by age 20, but a kobold can live for up to 120 years, a longevity they attribute to being distantly related to dragons. The tribe's leader is usually the oldest and smartest kobold. The other kobolds respect the old one's ability to survive so long, and they assume the leader will use that knowledge to help the tribe survive. Kobolds are egg-laying creatures, and litters range in size from 2 to 6 eggs. Kobolds exist in a world much larger than they are. Dwarfed by creatures usually at least 3 to 4 times their physical mass, living among such competition could be a constant struggle to assert dominance, with kobolds making sure they are never overlooked or taken for granted. But kobolds spend their energy elsewhere. While gnomes and halflings often integrate into other races' societies, kobolds turn inward. Kobolds have their own culture and a set of deeply introspective traditions. To generalize kobolds as xenophobic is misleading. They are perfectly happy to be overlooked by others, having disdain for other races and preferring to conduct their activities in secret. Being consistently underestimated is seen as a gift, though, one they have taken advantage of for countless generations. The intimate thoughts of a kobold would probably surprise most other individuals. Kobolds live in an undeviated state of contentment, despite any setbacks experienced by their tribe. It's strange for others to imagine that such weak creatures can lead such fulfilling lives, until you consider one lingering piece of knowledge that kobolds have never overlooked. They are kin to dragons. The origin of this connection is unclear, based heavily on folklore and myth, but the relationship is undeniable. The two races are related. Being completely certain of their heritage gives kobolds a confidence that is neither troubled by self-doubt nor arrogantly expressed. It affords individual kobolds great comfort to think that no matter what happens to them, the dragon can never be taken from their blood. This draconic heritage invigorates kobold culture with an indomitable will to endure any hardship. While kobolds do not have the benefit of longevity that dragons enjoy, they do understand what it means to take the long view. Their individual lives might be fleeting, but the impact of their presence in the world is widely felt. A powerful, self-sacrificing instinct rules kobolds whenever their tribe is endangered. Kobolds readily struggle against impossible odds or unconquerable foes simply to buy time or coordinated aversion. The needs of the tribe outweigh the continued existence of any one kobold. This is not to say that kobolds needlessly throw their lives away. They value their lives no less than any other creature, retreating when necessary. Kobolds are intimately aware of both their shortcomings and their strengths. Small and weak, they use numbers to aid in bringing down a larger foe. They employ their speed to divide enemies, set up flanking maneuvers, and create hit-and-run assaults. Clever and inventive, they safeguard their home with cruelly ingenious traps, using tight spaces and passages through which only creatures their size can travel easily. If all seems lost, kobolds throw themselves bravely at the enemy, hoping beyond hope to stop it. This selfless behavior carries over into everyday life. Expansion of the tribe is more important than personal accomplishments, and any personal accomplishments should advance the tribe. Success of the tribe is personal success. It is only through vast population, however, that a tribe can hope to thrive and become wealthy, so kobolds shamelessly reproduce. Impersonal mating is commonplace, with females choosing mates by practical measures instead of influences such as love or lust. While kobolds do form bonding relationships, the idea of sexual monogamy is alien to them. Kobolds desire to spread their kind everywhere, and the inability of one warren to contain a tribe's population is celebrated. When this happens, part of the old tribe breaks off to expand into a new territory. Frequent overcrowding in their lairs has permanently erased the concept of privacy from kobolds' lives. Sleeping quarters are shared, with children having the least privacy. In most tribes, not enough room exists to comfortably accommodate everyone, and only the hardest working members of a tribe are afforded any degree of personal space. Lack of privacy has also resulted in the absence of modesty. Kobolds are not self-conscious about nudity, whether in the presence of the same or the opposite sex. They still wear clothing for protection and decoration, but clothing is not seen as essential. Living in such close quarters means conflict is always a possibility. Kobolds don't hide their feelings, instead quarreling openly when they need to. When emotions run high, kobolds express themselves immediately and without holding back. Despite the intensity of such displays, they rarely turn lethal because the proximity of other kobolds prevents such interactions from taking place discreetly. In this way, all problems are dealt with before they can fester and grow. Kobolds also make up for their physical ineptitude with a cleverness for trap making and tunneling. Their layers consist of low tunnels through which they move easily, but which hinder larger humanoids. Kobolds also riddle their layers with traps. The most insidious kobold traps make use of natural hazards and other creatures. A tripwire might connect to a spring-loaded trap that hurls clay pots of flesh-eating green slime or flings crates of venomous giant centipedes at intruders. Similar to dwarves, they seem to have a near instinctive sense of what sections of stone or earth are strong or weak, are bearing a load or are safe to excavate, or are likely to contain minerals or offer access to water. This ability enables them to fashion secure homes in places where other creatures wouldn't feel safe. Kobolds have a tribal society in which they all take on specialized roles that protect and sustain the tribe. The strongest kobolds are trained to be hunters and warriors. The most clever are crafters and strategists. The toughest are miners and beast wranglers, and so on. Even a stupid or physically weak kobold is given a role in the tribe, whether something as simple as picking mushrooms for food or watching over hatchlings, and they all understand their actions contribute to the survival of the group. The tribe practices for the eventuality of defending the lair against intruders, and their plans always include knowing the best escape routes and who is responsible for blocking tunnels to deter pursuit. Kobolds feel a cool affinity, or something akin to kinship, for other members of their tribe, but they are rarely affectionate with each other. Two kobolds who've known each other for over a decade might consider each other friends or enemies, but the strength of this sentiment is much fainter than any comparable human emotion. Since most of their waking time is spent working, adversarial kobolds rarely have opportunities to exchange insults, let alone come to blows over their differences. Although their sharp teeth would suggest they are carnivores, kobolds are actually omnivores, and they can eat just about anything, including meat, fruit, tree bark, bone, leather, and eggshells. A newly hatched kobold's first meal is usually its own shell. A hungry tribe leaves nothing behind from a kill, eating everything that's edible and using the rest to make tools or adornments. Kobolds shed teeth as they wear out and grow new ones their entire lives. Many wear their own shed teeth as jewelry, with more teeth indicating an older and wiser kobold. Some unscrupulous individuals wear teeth stolen or harvested from others in an attempt to make themselves seem older and more respectable. Most kobold tribes avoid eating what they call talking meat, intelligent creatures, because such behavior prompts retaliation. The fear of starvation can make them flexible about this principle, however, and if their options are either attacking such creatures or going hungry, kobolds are practical. A few tribes, particularly those in lightly populated areas, practice cannibalism, believing it is foolish to waste good meat. In any case, kobolds that eat humanoids don't simply start consuming corpses or prisoners right after a battle. They're more inclined to tie their victims to saplings and slowly roast them over a fire, or put them in a giant cookpot to make stew. Fortunately for the prisoners, the kobolds' almost comedic preparations sometimes give rescuers time to locate and free the captives before the kobolds settle down for the main course. Because the gnome god, Garl Glittergold, trapped the kobold god, Kurdlemach, in an inescapable maze, kobolds are bitterly hateful towards gnomes. Although they usually don't seek out gnomes to do them violence, if hostile kobolds encounter a mixed group of gnomes and other humanoids, the kobolds instinctively attack the gnomes. Kobolds in battle with gnomes are much less likely to run away because their hatred overrules their sense of self-preservation. A kobold's cautious nature doesn't mean it can't get angry. The blood of dragons flows in its veins, and like a raging drake, a kobold that is pushed too far or has its back against the wall can become a miniature storm of fangs and claws as it desperately tries to defend its life. Likewise, kinship to their own tribe can prompt kobolds to battle another kobold tribe for resources or territory. Such conflicts aren't common because two tribes will always prefer to expand in different directions if they come into contact, but they do happen. For example, two neighboring tribes that want exclusive claim to a flock of mountain goats might skirmish with each other every few days. Eventually, the leader of the warring tribe realizes it is losing due to attrition and moves its tribe to another area, ceding the contested territory to its more successful neighbors. Some humanoid communities have come to live peacefully with kobolds, even hiring them to dig their sewer tunnels, paying them with food and tools that kobolds wouldn't have access to on their own. If they are treated well and left alone to do the job, kobolds work industriously and build a network of passages beneath the streets, connecting them to a nearby waterway and greatly improving the town's sanitation. If the kobolds like the area and aren't mistreated by the humans, they might build a warren and make a permanent home there, while continuing to expand the town's sewers as the community grows. These so-called city kobolds live underground but might make occasional nighttime forays up to the surface. Roughly 1/4 of the towns and cities in the world have kobold communities living under them. The kobolds are so good at staying hidden that the surface-dwelling citizens in the area often don't know what lies beneath them. Because the kobolds make sure to stay out of the way of anyone more dangerous than themselves, grow their own subterranean food, and prefer to sneak out at night, the people of a town might go for weeks or months without noticing evidence that kobolds are in the area, and years between actual sightings.
In emulation of his former mistress, Kurdlemach immediately began mining a lair of his own. Although he never asked for any help in this endeavor, he nonetheless received it, assisted by every kobold he had worked beside for the past several decades. Kurdlemach found a spot in the ground where a near limitless supply of metal ore and precious stones were waiting to be mined. Once properly unearthed, a discovery of this size could sustain kobolds for millennia and serve as the foundation for their society. With Kurdlemach commanding the operation, it quickly became the most structurally sound and resourcefully designed mine the world has ever seen. Kurdlemach called it Darus Stricksy, a fortress fit for dragons. Nothing rivaled it.
Kobolds are adept at identifying broken, misplaced, discarded, or leftover crafted items from other creatures that can still be put to use. They prefer to scavenge objects that have clearly been lost or thrown away, which is easy to do without attracting attention. At the same time, they don't automatically shy away from trying to grab items that are property of other creatures, because such objects are more likely to be in good condition and thus more useful or valuable. When they go after items that aren't free for the taking, kobolds try to remain undetected and don't give their targets reason to harm them. Some aggressive individual kobolds and tribes do exist, but in general, kobolds don't purposely provoke retaliatory attacks from the creatures they steal from. It's better to be cautious and overlooked than to be considered dangerous and a threat. There are a couple situations kobolds might abandon this careful approach, though. First, because of their historical hatred of gnomes, city kobolds often go out of their way to target gnomes' houses and shops. Even in such cases, the kobold's fear of retaliation usually prevents them from trying to directly harm the gnomes, but they might spit in the milk, balance dishes on a table so they're easily knocked over and broken, or scatter sewing needles all over the floor. Petty, vengeful acts that humiliate, injure, or anger the gnomes, but not so much that the gnomes want to hunt down and kill the kobolds. Because of the kobolds' animosity, gnomes tend to avoid or abandon settlements that have a severe infestation of kobolds, and conversely, kobolds are usually driven out of communities that have a large gnome population. Second, kobolds are always on the lookout for magic that might help them free their imprisoned god Kurdlemach. Typical kobolds don't know how to use a wand, a spellbook, or anything with more magical power than a potion, but they all believe that the tribal sorcerer can figure out how to use any such item when they come across it. When kobolds sense an opportunity to separate a magic item from its owner, they are often willing to take the chance of revealing themselves because the potential reward is worth the risk. Thirdly, kobolds have a strong tendency to willingly serve chromatic dragons and worship them as if they were demigods. This isn't a casual sort of worship or lip service. Kobolds are awed in the presence of a dragon, as if an actual avatar of a deity were in their presence. Kobolds fall all over themselves to obey orders from a dragon, even if they are dangerous orders. Although kobolds usually don't worship Tiamat directly, they recognize her as the dragon goddess of all chromatic dragons and as the master of their racial god, Kurdlemach. Kobolds don't fear or shun arcane magic. They see magic as a part of their connection to dragons and are proud to be blessed with the ability to wield such power. Young kobold sorcerers are trained by elders, and the training has an almost religious significance. Most kobold sorcerers are of the Draconic bloodline origin and specialize in either damaging magic, which can also be used in mining, augmentation of materials or allies, or divination to find raw materials and foresee threats to the tribe. The main reason why kobolds depend on arcane magic rather than divine is Kurdlemach's imprisonment, which makes it difficult for him to grant spells to mortals and for those mortals to receive his favor. It is said that the god of kobolds was a vassal of Tiamat, the evil queen of dragons. When the gnome god Garl Glittergold stole a treasure from Tiamat's hoard, she sent Kurdlemach to retrieve it. Garl lured his pursuer into a maze-like cavern, then collapsed the exits behind him, trapping Kurdlemach for all eternity. It is such that kobolds have come to rely on sorcery first and foremost, and why they eternally search for a way to free their deity. Kobolds' names are derived from the Draconic tongue and usually relate to a characteristic of the owner, such as scale color, distinctive body parts, or typical behavior. For example, Redfoot, White Claw, and Scurry are common translations of often used names. A kobold might change its name when it becomes an adult or add additional word syllables after important events such as completing its first hunt, laying its first egg, or surviving its first battle. One rare genetic trait that further cements kobolds' biological tie to dragons are the winged kobolds known as Urds. Urds hatch seemingly at random from kobold eggs, even in a tribe that has no adult Urds. Although being able to fly is an incredible gift and it would be expected for kobolds to interpret the wings as a blessing from Tiamat, ordinary kobolds resent Urds and don't get along with them. Fragments of kobold legend speaks of Koraliek, a winged godling servant of Kurdlemach, who betrayed his master in some way. Kobolds see Urds as Koraliek's favorites, and they project their resentment to this traitor onto their winged kin. Kobolds prefer temperate and tropical climates. Kobold tribes in colder regions tend to be smaller in population and more aggressive in their hunting, since food is relatively scarce in such areas. Kobolds reside most commonly in hilly or mountainous terrain. Such locations usually have natural caves suitable for living, plenty of room to dig, and ready sources of food. Although layering in such locations puts kobolds in competition with surface-dwelling humanoids, their ability to avoid detection often means their warrens go unnoticed by their larger rivals. Because they live underground, kobolds have access to a remarkable amount of earth-based treasures such as metal ores and unpolished gems. They have the basic skill to extract metals found in their natural state and to polish raw gemstones. Although they don't create their own coinage, nuggets of raw materials used for trade, bribes, and crafting are commonly found in kobold lairs. Kobolds are talented at crafting. Most tribes have a remarkable amount of treasure in the form of simple jewelry, such as armbands, rings, necklaces, and other items that are small or can be constructed out of small pieces. These adornments are always fashioned so that they don't make noise when the wearer moves, as that would make it difficult for a kobold to sneak anywhere. Even though the jewelry they make has no functional purpose, kobolds savor these items, perhaps as some echo of a dragon's inclination to collect treasure. Because the tribe's wealth is portable, the kobolds can relocate quickly without needing to transport containers of nuggets and gems, and they can offer these items as bribes or tribute to more powerful creatures, or as religious offerings to a dragon. Kobolds, much like goblins, have an affinity for capturing and taming smaller animals and beasts, particularly rats, dire rats, and reptilian creatures like lizards that thrive in a cave or underground environment. The kobolds corral these pets and allow them to roam free, either feeding them scraps or allowing them to forage for insects and other morsels too small for the kobolds to care about. Much in the way that human villagers keep chickens, these animals help the kobolds with pest control and are occasionally used as food. Giant rats and similarly sized lizards are also used as pack animals and guardians. Some tribes train giant weasels to serve as mounts or guardians, relying on their speed, keen senses, and the ability to fit in kobold-sized tunnels. Other tribes use giant bats as mounts and guard animals, but the bats require a lot of space in which to move and are found only in layers that feature large caves or close access to the surface world.
Garl Glittergold was not pleased. He looked upon Darus Stricksy and beheld the marvel Kurdlemach and his followers had created, surpassing any achievement his own people had mastered in the same time. While gnomes were playing useless games, kobolds had been busy working and were now fit to emerge as one of the dominant races in creation. And so, with a casual wave of his hand, Garl collapsed Kurdlemach's mine, crushing all the kobolds inside. The gods were appalled and demanded an explanation from Garl, who could only sputter out that his actions were intended as a joke, as if that could somehow excuse the heartless massacre he had committed. Garl had acted out of spite and, even more degrading for the gnome god, jealousy over mortal accomplishment. And yet, regardless of all the berating Garl received from his equals, not one deity came forward to reverse the damage done, leaving the crime unpunished. Then Io moved on behalf of Kurdlemach.
In addition to labyrinthine tunnels and hidden traps, kobold lairs hold many practical, everyday use locations for the tribe. The kiln and crafting areas. A chamber that contains a kiln is usually one of the uppermost areas of the warren, because the fire needs to be vented to the surface in order to keep it from depleting the breathable air in the lair. Kobold crafters spend their time in this area, using the kiln to bake mud bricks and harden pottery. The room is also used for other noisy activities. The mines. Any chamber in the kobold's underground complex that isn't immediately needed for another purpose is mined and excavated, both to extract usable ore and minerals and to provide room for later expansion of the den. Mushroom farms. Kobolds are not skilled at agriculture, but they can get sustenance from subterranean mushrooms and hardy plant life that can live underground. A farm area might be completely underground or a cave near the surface with holes in the ceiling to let in some sunlight. Root cellars. Much as humans do in their dwellings, kobolds set aside rooms with deep pits in which they preserve food for lean times. Sleeping areas. Every layer has one or more spaces for living and sleeping, each large enough to comfortably hold 10 to 30 adult kobolds. Individual kobolds might rest in a shallow pit or a personal-sized alcove, depending on the customs of the tribe. These spaces are used primarily for resting, although some kobolds might quietly work on crafts while others sleep. The creature's sanitary needs, such as they are served by a deep pit near each sleeping area where refuse is deposited. Most sleeping areas in the lair also double as hatcheries. Kobolds tend to their eggs by nesting them in a shallow pit lined with earth and dried grass. Because the eggs are susceptible to cold, they are kept near a slowly burning fire or are protected by an insulating layer of dung and decomposing matter around the eggs. The throne room. A warren's throne room is always protected by traps and features a shrine to Kurdlemach in the form of a carved idol behind the throne. Rather than entering the chamber to pay homage, kobolds offer prayers at its entrance with the belief that their god hears them. The location might include a basin where offerings such as metal nuggets, raw gems, and teeth can be left. The kobolds in a lair sleep in shifts, and all activities in the warren go on around the clock. Kobolds tend to be more active at night than during daylight hours, but unlike in a human settlement, there is no time when most of the inhabitants are resting. Warrens are built so that sleeping areas are somewhat isolated from the noise of work areas, enabling miners and crafters to do their work without awakening the sleepers. Kobolds learn at a young age to fall asleep to the noise of hammering nearby, but they still wake quickly at the sound of unusual activity. To the adventurer boldly striding into a kobold lair in search of treasure or to rid a community of a violent aggressor, I give these words of advice. Watch for traps, walk slowly, and carry a 10-foot pole. Be suspicious. A kobold holding its ground is probably bait. Be wary of arcane sorcery. Fear the wrath of Kurdlemach and the blood of Tiamat, as a kobold warband always counts a sorcerer among its number. Let there be light. Kobolds prefer to fight in darkness, where they retain an advantage over light-dependent enemies. And finally, don't start a fight you can't finish.
Once the ninefold dragon realized that no god would champion the kobolds, he searched through the souls of those who died that day until he found Kurdlemach's broken body, still clinging to life. Even buried under so much rock, Kurdlemach wouldn't give up on his people, refusing to let go of his mortal form until he could find the strength to dig them all out. Io gave Kurdlemach a choice. He would either empower Kurdlemach with the strength to rebuild the mine, or he would make the mighty kobold a champion of his people for all eternity. In this latter case, the loss of Darus Stricksy would remain, but the memory of what happened would endure in the minds of kobolds forever, ensuring that atrocities of this magnitude would never be overlooked again. Kurdlemach made his choice, and because of that decision, this story can be told today.
This has been D&D Legends and Lore. Thank you for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And please consider leaving us an Apple Podcast review, as it helps tremendously with discoverability. If you're interested in supporting us and helping us keep the lights on here at D&D Legends and Lore, please also consider checking out our Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Thank you again to our video editor, Sean Alexander. And with that being said, thank you again for watching, and happy adventuring.